Joe Rogan.
Everybody's favorite lefty.
Everyone's favorite leftist, Joe Rogan, who seemingly in the Bernie Sanders to Ron DeSantis pipeline. It's a unique kind of voter, but I guess it's the kind of voter that Joe Rogan is, because here he is less than a few years after endorsing Bernie Sanders, Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders, now seemingly excited about the prospect of Ron DeSantis running for president, even becoming president. Let's take a listen to this clip.
Yeah, so all this stuff is happening while we have a dead man as a president.
Yeah.
It's just
Are you throwing out any
fun.
Any support towards anyone? Or are you going to hold off? And because I know, didn't Elon Musk come out recently for DeSantis?
Yeah, I think Ron DeSantis would work as a good president. I mean, what he's done for Florida has been admirable.
Look, I feel like I'm doing breaking news right now. Yeah. That wasn't even on purpose.
I feel like what he did for Florida, a lot of people gave him a lot of grief, but ultimately he was correct. He was correct when it comes to like deaths. He was correct when it comes to protecting our vulnerable populations. He was correct in terms of distribution of monoclonal antibodies. And he was furious when the government tried to pull those. They were trying to pull very effective treatments. He is not perfect. He's a human being. But what he's done is stand up for freedoms. And people think that so there's some weird gaslighting shit that went on where people equated freedom and saying the word freedom to like right-wing bigotry and hate is so strange.
Why would people equate praising Ron DeSantis to right-wing bigotry and hate? That's a real fucking head scratcher, Gavin. I can't figure it out. There was this weird thing
all this stuff is happening while we have a dead man.
This guy, he was so publicly hateful, and I didn't, whatever. I didn't care. I got behind him. And then everybody was like, wow, are you hate? Oh, it was the craziest fucking thing.
Yeah. So obviously DeSantis gained a lot of clout and credibility on the right wing from people like Joe Rogan and even people like Jimmy Dore because of the way he handled the whole COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns, basically taking as hands-off approach as possible when it comes to lockdowns and COVID restrictions. And yeah, if that's your thing, if that's like the only issue you care about, then sure, I guess DeSantis is your guy. But the problem is for DeSantis, and this is something I think he's going to have to reckon with as he attempts to kind of out-Trump Trump in the Republican primary. And the problem is that the COVID-19 pandemic is kind of in the rear view mirror now. Technically it's still raging, people are still dying, but as far as our society, we've kind of moved on. Like most people, it's not one of the top issues they care about, and maybe it should be. I'm not saying whether or not that's a good thing, but that is the truth. Most people don't really care much about COVID or the lockdowns or any of that shit. We've moved on. There's been like 500,000, scandals since then. All this stuff has, taken precedence in the news cycle. Again, I'm not saying that's how it should be. That's just the way it is. It's not going to be one of the determinative deciding issues come 2024. So, DeSantis's main claim to fame, his main, clout on the right wing, and just in general, I mean, some independents fall for this too, to be honest. It's kind of losing its touch, right? So what is he going to lean into come 2024? Is he just going to talk about his response to lockdowns? Because I even if you think he was correct about that, even if you think he was 100% on point there, I mean, like, what else does he have to show for his time as governor? Like, what has he really done to make Florida great? What does he really have to show other than the COVID response? So again, with COVID becoming less of an issue as we get closer to 2024 and all these other issues, eating up the news cycle, I just don't really see how he's going to sustain himself as a, political force. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But again, it's not like, another pandemic is rearing its head and we're about to go through this whole thing all over again. I think we're kind of moving on as a society.
100%. And if this is the only thing that you can point to say that you're into with Ron DeSantis, it kind of points to how how much you value these other issues that you've, proclaimed to. And obviously we know that Joe Rogan will just mirror back the opinions for the most part, unless you say something positive about the trans community. He'll mirror back whatever kind of opinions you have right back at you, right? He's just kind of a piece of rubber, a trampoline that he'll just oh yeah, that's interesting. Like he'll just, let people kind of go down their own tangents. But one of the things that he's always said has been like his fucking line in the sand, right? The one thing that he's always said he will never waver on is the free speech issue, right? This is a man who has, whether you love him or you hate him, or you're somewhere in the middle, which is how most people feel, obviously, he has completely changed forever the medium of podcasting. He was the biggest trailblazer that there was and probably ever will be. He amassed an audience people never thought was possible doing this. He did all of those things. And he could never do that if we didn't, have free speech rights, right? If we weren't allowed to just say whatever the fuck we want. And he had on some really interesting and compelling people that would never have gotten on mainstream media. I mean, he had a home for Abby Martin when she was doing Breaking the Set, all that kind of stuff, right? So he's always said that he would die on this hill. And it's interesting because Ron DeSantis is a uniquely anti-free speech guy. He's a uniquely anti-free speech government writ large in America. Not only would I argue that they don't say gay legislation, which he was the biggest champion of in the entire state of Florida, is dramatically, explicitly anti-free speech because it literally, it fundamentally restricts your speech and the speech of students. Okay. But he also, and I know I won't get any pushback from chat on this man enthusiastically pushed through the Florida legislation that mirrored the one that Abby Martin sued in Georgia, except it still exists in the state of Florida thanks to their fucking crappy ass fascist governor. It's like some legislation that's called the Defending Against Anti-Semitism Act, but really what it does is it bans BDS organization. Now, Joe, as somebody who has had Abby Martin on multiple times, has had this spelled out for you, what the fuck is going on in Israel. What the hell, man? And he would just plead ignorant. He'd be like, I like this one thing about that guy. I said he wasn't perfect. Okay, well, he's not perfect on that. What else is he not perfect on? Joe, you said that you really care about climate change, right? Oh, I love my kids. I want to leave this world a better place for them. Yeah, well, DeSantis has come out so many times to say that, well, he might believe in global climate change. He doesn't want to do any, quote, left-wing stuff, right? So nothing that would possibly prohibit it. While he's the governor of Florida, perhaps the state most at risk from climate change, a place like Miami, the Florida Keys, they're all facing extreme flooding. We could go on and on and on. Okay. This is not a good dude. He's not. And the fact that you would throw away all of your most enshrined principle, I use the example of free speech because that's the hill he's died on the most, but also you supposedly want people to have health care. This dude would never give a fucking dime to health care. I challenge how much, anyway. I challenge how much Joe would actually prioritize those things because this is a guy that's going to cut his taxes and, not impede on his life in any meaningful way. And that's what rich people want. But the fact that people still try and portray him as like an average Joe, like a working class Joe, he's just not anymore, guys. He is a rich person. He is an aristocrat and he's behaving like one.
Absolutely. Plus, DeSantis sure triggered the libs. He definitely succeeded in that regard. But if you actually look at the result of the response to COVID in the state of Florida, it's not particularly impressive. Florida was the state where the second most amount of people died from COVID, right after, guess what? Texas, where Joe fucking Rogan lives. So, second most deaths in the entire country. 4 out of every 10 COVID deaths in Florida happened in a nursing home. So everyone, rightfully criticizes Andrew Cuomo for his response as it relates to nursing homes. But 4 out of every 10 COVID deaths in Florida was in a nursing home. So, I think there's some blame that deserves to go around to a guy like DeSantis, too, for overseeing that, right? But you're never going to hear a guy like Rogan acknowledge that fact or reckon with the reality of how he actually governed his state during the pandemic. No, it's all just about the fact that he triggered the libs and he, was pro monoclonal antibodies and all that shit.
Yeah, 100%. I think that Florida might actually be third because I think California is number 1. But anyway, point still stands. They had a fuck ton of deaths.
Interesting. The article I was looking at said that Florida was number 2. But anyway, who knows? Yeah, either way, someone can pull it up and chat.
Oh, I have it pulled up. That's why I can share my screen really quick if we want to see. But yeah, this is just the site I've been going off of. It has a good dashboard right here. But you can just see how devastating the responses in Florida. But anyway,
I just confirmed on another website too, so that is 100% accurate.
but either
My
way, it
apologies.
doesn't matter. And in cases alone, I think they were number 18. So it wasn't like they were which is what they were lower in. They were higher in deaths, but lower in cases. And they were still number 18 out of all the states, at least confirming what I saw. And people, these numbers are changing every day. I wasn't trying to bust your balls. I just was confirming. But yeah, it's crazy that he's been praised as like having the fucking right idea here. And also, he's like a diet Trump. And I would love to like he's trying to do everything Trump style or out Trump the Trump or whatever. Who was president when all that lockdown shit happened?
Yep, Donald Trump. And that's something else that's hilarious. People who love to talk about the lockdown left. It wasn't a goddamn leftist that implemented the fucking lockdown. Hate to tell you. It was Donald J. Trump. Donald J. fucking Trump, guys. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. Still interesting stuff, obviously. I did want to also spotlight a recent a recent Jimmy Dore tweet on the issue of Ron DeSantis, because usually Joe and Jimmy are pretty aligned, and they obviously were aligned when it comes to COVID and the vaccine. They're both basically on the same page as far as all that went. So it is interesting to see how this will shape out. Here's Jimmy from a couple days ago, who's actually tweeting friend of the show, Nick, aka Socialist MMA, says, dude who is banned protesting, cracked down on the BDS movement, and banned teachers from discussing race is talking about quote unquote freedom. Again, and he's talking about DeSantis there. So, I have to say credit to Jimmy for coming out and pointing out some of the stuff that we just talked about, or at least doing it via this quote from Nick, and saying, yo, this guy's not pro-freedom. The fuck are you talking about? You think this guy's pro-free speech? Unless you're criticizing Israel, unless you're trying to talk about fucking race or whatever in the curriculum. Yeah, free speech my fucking ass.
Yeah, I forgot to mention how vicious and brutal he was in May of 2020 during the George Floyd justice for Black Lives writ large protests. Breonna Taylor, right? All these lives that were affected by the police people were marching for. I don't want to attribute it to one person, but it was kicked off by the tragic public film death of George Floyd. They were relentlessly brutal to the protesters in Florida. They fucking violated so many of their lives. It happened everywhere across the country. But Ron DeSantis was fucking proud of it. And he was vile and disgusting. And so thank you for reminding me of that, Jimmy and Socialist MMA, Nick.